Hello everyone, my name is TheIrishAtheist, and this is the first of what I hope will be several of my relatively coherent ramblings on faith. I understand it's a subject that has become popular to discuss, and I'd like to throw in a few cents if possible. Being Irish and being an atheist is quite the challenge. Atheism in Ireland is still firmly in the closet. The atheist sits with his mouth closed, has a smile on his lips and a pleasant nod in response to whomever it is may ask. Not necessarily that atheism is an oppressed point of view in Ireland, but rather a very, very unfamiliar one. I'm not sure if an Irishman would be more suspicious of a man of a foreign faith or a man with no faith at all. It's an interesting question, and I haven't quite sat down to ask the general public. But I'd like to imagine that the Irish atheist is a reserved atheist, a quiet atheist, an atheist who doesn't know a lot about being proud of their atheism. The concept of pride in atheism is a foreign one to me, and it's one that I'm challenged by, and I have a hard time intellectually rationalizing it, because it, in a way, places atheism in a category that shares similarities with faith, in the sense that an individual can be a proud Catholic, or a proud Protestant, or a proud Jew, or a proud follower of the teachings of Islam. Although, ironically, many of those faiths actively look down on pride. So the idea of being a proud atheist is similar to the idea of being a proud thinker. Taking pride in your objection to something, I suppose, is historically viable, but I just find the concept strange. As a young man, I wasn't raised in a particularly religious family. We attended Mass primarily when it was required, when the occasion called for it. There's a tradition of baptism, First Communion, and confession in Ireland, and all of these are points in an Irish child's life, and they're the enforcement of indoctrination. For most children, I would imagine, in the 21st century and in the late 20th century, they were points of interest for the child's life. I look back fondly on my first Holy Communion and my first Holy Confession, although they are not... They were not things that at the time I had the ability to reason my way out of, and they were not things that I questioned, because they were positive events. Rarely do children question events which serve primarily as positive reinforcement in exchange for an act of prostration, confession, which was slightly uncomfortable to the child. The reward was immense as a child. A whole day devoted to you, where your family was primarily honed in on you, and it was the same for confession. So these are positive reinforcing acts for a child, and while much of faith is a monotonous grind to a child, attending sermon is a monotonous grind to a child, and as I said, only a handful of children truly absorb it. It heavily depends on the family, but for me it was positive, and those are things that are really strong in children, are positively reinforcing things. I didn't question it until later, and it was primarily because I didn't come from a family that was strong in faith. My atheism is not the result of rebellion, as many objectors would like to place many atheists into this bracket, that we are the result of rebellion. I find that laughable, and a sad defense against the truth, that many atheists merely come to their position as a point of reason. Why faith is so ingrained in Irish culture, I can't say for sure, and I'm not sure that anyone truly could. I have a suspicion, which is reasonably well backed up, that it's mostly our history. When you are invaded and the subject of conquest and live in deep poverty for much of your nation's history, one thing that you can certainly rely on is the indifference of the Lord. He is always there to listen but not respond, and at least that, in a maelstrom of instability, offers an individual some degree of stability. Although faith in the 21st century in Ireland has become an interesting thing, it's not so much an in-your-face event as it was in perhaps the beginning of the 20th century, and then all beyond that. Some of our social laws are still in place because of faith. Much of the reason why abortion is illegal in Ireland is because of faith. That's probably one of the very last bastions that religion in Ireland has held on to, is abortion. But generally the Catholic Church exists as a doting grandparent in the Irish home, somebody who is there to remind you of who you are, what you've been, and possibly where you're going. Most Irish households, whether strong or weak in their faith, will have some degree of religious iconography in them, be it a church, be it a cross, or a painting, or a picture of a saint, or a Bible laying around in the home. I couldn't intellectually consider myself an enemy of the construct of faith entirely. I believe firmly that it was a necessary component in human history to allow us to grapple with what we did not know. The unfortunate part about being human is the ability to critically reason and then not have the skills or the experimental data to show you what an event in the world is. So a combination of both that high human reasoning and the primitive instincts of the human being most likely resulted in the creation of faith. Certainly I'm in no way in agreement with any of the ethical horrors that have been conducted in the name of faith, things like the Inquisitions and the Crusades, although the Crusades is a touchy subject for some. Many of my contemporaries, I suppose, would have us believe that atheism needs revolutionaries. It needs its leaders have been mirrored in faith throughout the years, but it's hard to have a messiah of atheism. It's hard to have a martyr of atheism. We can certainly have close to. I believe that perhaps Christopher Hitchens is approaching that level. I wouldn't like to call Christopher Hitchens a martyr, but he's certainly, in death, he is remembered as an outspoken opponent of faith. I think that atheism does have its revolutionaries, and they're slowly crawling out of the woodwork. As I mentioned, Christopher Hitchens being one of them, Richard Dawkins, Dr. Richard Dawkins, also being another. But they do have a unique new brand of aggressive atheism, and aggressive atheism is a wonderful frontline barge for the movement, for the intellectual acceptance that there is no God. Though there need to be people behind individuals like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins that are willing to pick up those who have accepted the reasoning behind the idea that faith may be a lie. Though I do believe that atheism is a key to understanding objective truth. I mean, what better way to introduce people to higher reasoning and logical thought and method than to challenge and then subsequently shatter the strongest preconceived notions in human history, and that is of faith. And these are global things. Both in any corner of the world you can find individuals praying to a God that doesn't exist. I feel that our quest can enlighten and potentially unlock many, many doors for the individuals who we take into our arms. And as I've said, we can wipe away the ignorance of centuries, and we must be prepared to apply the salve of reason to the muddled mind. In our success, we shall, with guiding hand, convert from dogma and scripture to reason and method. And a human civilization free of faith and the faux truth of fantasy is a civilization ready to embrace the inherently beautiful nature of thought and discovery. That being said, this doesn't mean that faith didn't have a role to play in the development of humanity. Contrarily, beyond the horrors of faith lie endless philosophical truths that faith has created for us. Faith is rich in history and art and stories of human triumph, but as we seek to delve into the truth behind faith, I think we can find genuine acts of real human success. I think faith should now, in a time of great human change be considered a relic or a stepping stone of human advancement and of progress on the road to human enlightenment.